Well, actually, I didn't start working at conventions as a journalist till 1980, when I was well into middle age. It was the Republican convention in Detroit that nominated Ronald Reagan, and the Democratic convention in New York that renominated President Carter. It was also the last convention that the networks covered gavel to gavel, the broadcast networks. I probably had something to do with them deciding not to do that. And it was the last convention where anything remotely exciting happened. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was seriously considering putting former President Gerald Ford on the ticket as his running mate, and there was about a day or two of intense, feverish speculation, so much so that the night he was nominated, Reagan had to come to the hall, not to give his acceptance speech, but to quell all this and to tell the delegates, we talked about it, it's not going to happen, I'm going to nominate George Herbert Walker Bush. And it was quite a moment, because you had all the kind of fever that we've seen this year over weeks, compacted really into about 2 days, with the possibility of a unprecedented act of putting a former president on the ticket as vice president. So that was the first and last time I experienced anything approaching genuine suspense at a convention.
Reaching back even before that, when you were a speechwriter for Bobby Kennedy, did you attend?
Robert Kennedy had been killed in June, and
right.
I was by the time the convention started actually working for New York Mayor Lindsay. I mean, if you want to talk about convention memories, what hooked me onto this was listening to the 1952 conventions as a kid in my grandfather's summer cottage with my mom, who was very politically interested. And the 52 Republican convention was an absolute knockdown, drag-out fight. I mean, it was like an old days. Between Dwight Eisenhower and the conservative hero Robert Taft, there were floor fights, credentials fights, platform fights, bitter speeches from at a convention, one side attacking the other, and I had no idea what was going on, but I thought, wow, this is something.
So now that everything's so stage managed, does that really take away a lot of the fun?
It surely makes conventions less exciting. There are people who got into this business earlier who remember the Ford-Reagan contest of 1976, where it really was in doubt till the last couple of fights as to who was going to be the nominee. I did attend the 1980 Democratic Convention when there were, 40% of the delegates were for Ted Kennedy, didn't want Carter renominated. But it's obvious that that kind of convention has ceased to exist. And if you go to a convention with the expectation that something, an actual fight may break out, you're going to be disappointed. I mean, maybe if John McCain picks Joe Lieberman, we'll see a revolt on the right. So you have to judge them by a different standard, which is what are they trying to do? These are still gatherings of the two major political parties in America to nominate two people, one of whom is going to be the next president, unless Ralph Nader or Bob really, comes on strong. And so you go to these things, at least from my perspective, to say, okay, what is this convention, this 4-day package, trying to say to the country about the nominee? Because that also tells you where they think their weaknesses are, where they think their targets of opportunity are. And you learn stuff just by hearing all this prepackaging. And beyond that, most of us who do this know an awful lot of people here who will tell you, not in front of a camera, but over a cup of coffee or something stronger, what they really think, what are they worried about. I'm going to be chatting over the next few days with a number of people that I want to talk to, elected officials and other folks. And I ask them, okay, there's no camera rolling. Tell me what your biggest worry is about Obama in your state. Where's his best chance to make hay? Are there local issues that we national journalists don't understand that may really affect the outcome in your state? And there are a lot of things like that. So that's what you come to a convention to learn.
There's been several reports in the last couple of days about sort of strife building up again in the Clinton camp. What do you make of that?
Well, there's 15,000 journalists here and no story, but beyond that, there's some ill will here. This is the closest fight for a nomination since Reagan almost unseated Jerry Ford in '76. Obama has 2,200 delegates. She has about 1,800 delegates. It's been a quarter century or more since we've been remotely that evenly divided, either party. So this is actually a throwback to the older days in the sense that you never went to a convention a generation ago and didn't expect fights. That's what conventions are for. You're supposed to have a fight and figure out who the nominee was. So you've got a whole generation of politicians and journalists for whom this is like unheard of. The greater question is, when we're talking about this discontent, when you look at these polls and say X% of Clinton voters are not going to vote for Obama, what's your picture of that voter? Are you picturing a liberal, progressive feminist? Or are you picturing a white working class guy of conservative cultural taste who gave Clinton huge numbers in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, West Virginia? And are those folks Hillary voters, or are they not Obama voters? Is anything she's going to say to those voters going to make much of a difference, or is that a sell that Obama himself is going to have to make? I obviously think it's the latter. As far as the behind-the-scenes grousing about whether everybody got the right props from everybody else, it's fun to talk about. I think at the end of the day, that's really not going to be what this election turns on.
And what do you make of the Joe Biden pick?
The Biden pick was, eminently sensible, I think is the best way to put it. People are always, every 4 years, people come up, particularly columnists with too much time in their hands, of which I used to be one, with these out-of-the-box, wild speculations, You should pick Joe Torre, because he showed leadership skills in 10 years as a Yankee manager. He should pick a transgendered vegetarian and really, whatever. By and large, that doesn't happen. The one out-of-the-box vice presidential pick that I can think of in recent years was Geraldine Ferraro, that Walter Mondale picked. He clearly picked her because she was a woman. He was trying to make a statement. It backfired when it turned out that her husband had real estate interests that were suspect. And so what you look at in the vice presidential selection is, what does it tell you about the candidate and the presidential campaigns thinking about where they need help? And I think they made what seemed to me to be the right choice. Obama is the least experienced by traditional standards presidential nominee in certainly more than a century. Maybe Eisenhower had no governing experience, but when you win a world war, you get points. And so I think the idea of saying, look, I know that I need somebody who's rock solid in areas like national security, international affairs, who understands, among other things, that if I get like president, I got this other institution called the Congress down the street in Pennsylvania Avenue. I need to work with them. Biden has been there 35 years and has a decent record of bipartisanship. And his roots really are exactly the roots that the roots of the very voters that Obama needs to reach. So it made sense. Now, are some people kind of actively, anxiously watching to see whether Biden, says something that he may have cause to regret? That's probably true, and that's probably one of the risks. And I guess they figure that Biden can discipline himself.
Finally, last question on the Republican side. There's some signs that it's starting to point to Romney. If he goes that route, it seems like that would be sort of the default traditional pick. But then there's the possibility that he could go with Lieberman. Now, if he went with Lieberman, what would next week look like in St. Paul?
If John McCain were to go with Joe Lieberman, we actually might see a revival of what we talked about at the beginning. It is a convention where there was real ill will, public. That I absolutely believe that there are a certain number of delegates would put another choice in. I mean, we actually have had contested vice presidential nominations. Roosevelt had a fight for his choice in 1940.
Is there any way that could actually lead to someone else?
I doubt. I think generally speaking, the party goes with the nominee.
Okay.
But again, that's going to tell you something very significant, one way or the other, about who Romney picks. I mean, I think the ultimate safe choice is Governor Pawlenty of Minnesota, because he's a governor. He's a conservative who has attempted to sort of reform the financial system of Minnesota. He doesn't bring to the table the Mormon issue. And beyond that, if the McCain campaign was quoting Hillary Clinton about the bad things she said about Obama, I mean, when you see what McCain and Romney said about each other, it puts the Obama-Clinton contest to shame. And I'm not sure that you want on the ticket if personal life stories are the issue, a centimillionaire with I don't know how many houses he has, who made a lot of money as an entrepreneur, buying companies and streamlining them, which is another way of saying fired a lot of people. That may not be your route into the white working class. So the ultimate safe choice is Pawlenty, and under the old Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. Mm-hmm. And it will tell you whether McCain thinks he needed a bold gesture or was content to play out the hand he has.